There's that tone again, ladies and gentlemen, meaning it's time again for another podcast of the Lighter Than Air Ministries. Why, thank you. You're so very kind. Well, we need a little levity today. Hello, everybody. I'm Chaplain Dennis Keith Hale, and I'm coming to you directly from the Music Sanctuary here at the Lighter Than Air Ministries. Yes, this is where we perform all of our invocations, bringing on that luck of the power of the music. And I'm here today to remind ourselves and reflect upon a gentleman who knew all about the power of music and celebrated it on stages around the world. I'm talking about bluesman, soulman, good man, Frankie Lee. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Frankie Lee has passed. Ring the bells, ladies and gentlemen. Frankie Lee has passed, and with it, one of the great blues performers will be no more. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge his family, his wife Glennie, his family wherever they may be, and to all of his friends, for he had so many who called Frankie their friend. In fact, I got the news of Frankie's passing by one of his closest friends, Norman Shaw, who called me. And he was not expecting Frankie to go. No one was. And so it was a bit of a shock. But he had a wonderful life. And he shared the power of music. He shared live on stage, night after night, what this ministry is all about. The power of music. He loved it. So let me start and say, as Frankie would, how many of you out here understand the blues? Let me hear you say right on. If you've ever had the blues, I'd like to hear you say right on. And if you've got the blues right now, I'd like to hear you say, I am. Then you know who you are. I've got the blues too. We've all got the blues. Even the little baby has got the blues. Frankie Lee was born in Mart, Texas, on April 29th, 1941, and he died just short of his 74th birthday, unexpectedly. Mart, Texas, his hometown, is a cotton town, right outside of Waco, Texas, and Frankie sang in the church as a kid. At 21 years of age, he had had enough, and he went over to the big town of Houston. And there his talent was recognized by Don Roby, the gentleman who had that wonderful Peacock Duke label. The stories of Don Roby are legendary. And Frankie was part of a stable that included Big Mama Thornton, Little Richard, Gatemouth Brown, Junior Parker. And there was a new performer named Little Frankie Lee. Yes, they added the little to his name. And he had a big hit record, a big 45, called Taxi Baby. Then Frankie moved on to Austin, Texas, and his life changed again. He met the inimitable Sonny Rhodes, one of the great blues performers of his generation, still out there doing it. And he got a job with Ike and Tina Turner, and he hit the road with their review. He told me many times the energy of that review is what spurred him on often. Then, Frankie's cousin, the great blues man himself, Johnny Guitar Watson, hooked him up with the Iceman, Albert Collins. At the time, Albert had one of the hottest bands in the United States, and his featured vocalist was Frankie Lee. In 1965, Frankie moved out to California, signing with Elva Records, and started working. And this was his thing. He worked all the time. He loved it. And he was on every stage. He was in every town in California. Big rooms, small rooms, Frankie performed. Everyone knew him. He was playing gigs. He'd pick up bands when he needed them, or he'd work with the house band. One of the bands he picked up had Robert Cray, a young Robert Cray in it. And I met him in 1980 in a little health food restaurant in Fairfax, California called the Sleeping Lady Cafe, right there in the middle of affluent Marin County, every Monday night, you could see people trekking through the streets heading for Mark Naftalin's Blue Monday party. It was just a great get-together, went on for a number of years. Even ended up as a live radio show, and I had a pleasure of being part of some of that. On that stage, some of the greats. Percy Mayfield, Jimmy McCracklin, Sugar Pie DeSanto, Lowell Folsom, Pee Wee Creighton, Lloyd Glenn, and Rockin' Roy Brown. Rockin' Roy Brown was one of my favorites. And Frankie Lee. Frankie Lee had a big hit record, too, around that time when I first met him, or a little after. There is a music man, I hope he's still around, out of East Bay, Larry Slovin, and he had High Tone Records. And he got together with Frankie, and they put out a record called Ladies and the Babies, and I personally feel is one of Frankie's greatest. Beautifully produced, and it really showed his talent. Later, Frankie appeared on other labels, including Flying Fish and The Blind Pig, that great label. Frankie's energy, his spirit on stage, that's what knocked people out. I saw him on stages, including the Monterey Jazz Festival and San Francisco Blues Festival. I had a chance to stand in the wings and look out as he performed. And he did that on probably 2,756 other stages, clubs throughout his life, throughout the world. And I had a pleasure of being part of about 100 of those. And he was just a colorful, wonderful man who knew all about the power of music and shared it with us. May I share my favorite story of Frankie? I put it in Facebook. I was working at a festival, and we had the wonderful gospel group, the famous Soul Stirrers, and they were on stage about halfway through their set. I was in the wings, along with our technical director, Tim Crane, and we heard a voice sort of coming from a different direction. And I looked, and behind the next section of wings, the next flyways there, was Frankie Lee, his foot moving along with the rhythm, and he was singing in a very soft voice, but a beautiful, harmonistic counterpoint to what was being sung. In the gospel tradition, he sort of was out in front of it, and it was just beautiful. I looked at him, he had tears running down his cheeks as he sang. And Tim and I turned away. I knew he didn't want us to catch him doing that. But it was just a beautiful moment. It was Frankie Lee. We had a lot of good times. So, in passing, I want to say this. Let me ask you one last time, may I? If you've got the blues right now, I want you to say, I am. If you got the blues right now, I want you to say, I am. You know who you are. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us through this podcast. I am the chaplain, Dennis Keith Hale. We're coming to you once again from the auspices of the Lighter Than Air Ministry in Cotati, California. One more time, the bells for Frankie Lee. Thank you and good night.